Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bill and Amon's Bogus Hangout. I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves. Terry?
Hi, Terry Van Horn. I'm not working for anybody or anything. Retire.
Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Altair, and I am a writer.
Steve?
Hi, I'm Steve Grencher, and I'm a gentleman farmer.
I was just thinking that.
And I'm Bill Slosky. I'm the author of SEO by the Sea and director of SEO research for Go Fish Digital, and I work from home too. I think it's common these days in the SEO world.
Yeah.
I think there are more remote workers nowadays than ever before, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a new trend.
Is this a trend of the future for the SEO industry?
For everybody.
For everybody, I think the lockdown has changed people's perception of what working from home can be.
Well, like if you're having to travel a long way for one day to do a meeting, I think after you've done this, you realize there's nothing to be gained by going there.
Correct.
Really, not much.
Do you remember when Marissa Mayer came out and told people at Yahoo they can no longer work remotely? Everybody should come into the office.
Right.
I think that was the wrong move, huh?
Well, I think she had other reasons for it, because from people I've talked to who were at Yahoo at the time, they were experiencing some serious productivity issues from a lot of their off-site employees. They simply weren't working. They were, cashing a paycheck and, writing 100 lines of code a week. So I think there were some behind-the-scenes issues that were pulling on that. And there's something to be said about developing a certain level of community when you actually have. I could see a lot of businesses, and I know a couple that I'm talks with right now to help them with a transition to where they're going to a 3-on, 2-off, where you can work 2 days a week from home, or you can bank those that time from home. And I'm talking with a couple of smaller mom and pop places where a lot of their staff, there's no reason for them to be in the office other than to have them in the office. There's no reason why they can't have opportunities for those people to work from home on the days when their kid is sick versus simply not come in and, things like that. So I think we're up for a lot of changes between that and in the education sector, where universities are going to learn real quick. You mean I could get infinite students without expanding my campus?
Right.
Huh.
There's also,
Right.
I don't know what the laws are in the US, but in Canada, if you're going into a job, right, that classifies you as an employee, right? But I can work as a consultant from my own home, and then they don't have to pay any of the federal stuff. And the person working from home gets to write off a bunch of stuff that they normally wouldn't. So a person could actually make more money working at home than they could going into the job. Not to mention for me, if I worked anywhere in Toronto, it basically takes you an hour to get there and an hour home. So that's 2 hours that I waste every day sitting on the subway with a bunch of other.
A lot of times that's regulated by states, and sometimes states have different approaches. California passed a law in the past year where they said people working gig type jobs like driving Lyft or Uber, or performing in bars as musicians, or writers writing scripts for movies, are now employees of those places,
Oh, really?
even if you're not necessarily at the place. Right. So if you work at Uber, you're not an employee. You're not a contract employee.
Well, there's so
You're an
many.
actual employee.
See,
How
if I
about-
owned a SEO company, I would never hire anybody. They'd all be consultants.
Right, but see what that law in California did, which made it very hard for a lot of independent contractors, say writers, for example, was that if a company could hire a writer in another state and
They would hire.
report them as 1099, then they would hire that person as opposed to a person in California who has to become an employee for that particular project.
They
So
want employers to pay insurance, and they want employers
it's
to pay
about.
overtime,
yeah,
stuff like that.
big change.
They-
But they don't
they do-
realize they're still creating jobs. Like the only difference is they aren't having to pay stuff to the government that they normally would have to.
Correct. Well, in California is really big on what's it called? Payroll taxes, and it's a large source of income for the state. So if all of a sudden people who used to be gig employees are now employees, that's more payroll, more money for the state of California.
Are they going to give them unemployment when the gig's up? And are they?
I don't know. Do you know, Bill?
I don't know. I'm not in that position, so I'm not.
Yeah, I don't know either. What's a
all
good
the
question,
details.
Terry?
But that's a good point.
Yeah, so a lot of companies that were, so it hit independent workers really hard, like people who write, let's say you write content for a website or something. So if a company out of state wanted to use you and they had the choice of using you or somebody in a state that didn't have that new employee law, they could just bypass all of that and still go with a, a contract as a contract work instead of as an employee. So it put a huge it put a huge burden on companies who were using a lot of 1099 reporting people for work, contract work, and they had to rethink how they were going to do that, because if those people are in California or the businesses in California, they had to abide by the new law. So far, as
Now,
far as I know, California is the only state that has that law. Is that correct, Bill?
I don't know the laws of different states.
Yeah, I don't know
unfortunately.
either, but I haven't heard, because I'm, fairly involved in the independent contractor community, and I haven't seen anyone else go, oh my gosh, Mississippi is now doing this. But so as far as I know, California is the only state, but it made a huge impact within the state. And yes, like all
Yeah,
those
but the
writers-
writers will just move. That's
all
all
those-
that'll happen.
yeah, some of them did.
Yeah, of course.
And I have been working with people who've been working remotely since 2005. Some of the copywriters worked with in the SEO agency I worked in 2005 was a couple hundred miles away. She lived in a farmhouse and worked from there.
Right.
So it's not necessarily new, but it's just a lot more common now because of the coronavirus.
I think it's huge in our business.
It is huge.
There aren't too many places that actually have an office. Like,
Yeah, in
I only know of one.
but
I know some people who rent working spaces. office spaces.
Right, like a WeWork office. Yeah.
Wow, someone's got a bad cable.
You know, I have a friend in France who did that. He's in IT, and he did that for maybe a year, but now he stopped doing that. He's just working from home. So,
Well, I mean, I home, but I also pay rent. And you'll find a lot of smaller sole proprietors do that. Small mom and pops do that, where my wife actually owns the property, and then I rent the space from her
mhm.
for a lot of tax reasons, mostly. But it also allows us to do different things with our insurance on the property and things like that. You know, now it makes it easier for me to get business accounts for certain things because this is a piece of business property in the middle of where we are. So it's weird how these rules are going to play out. Personally, I would love to see employers taken out of the entire tax program, where the employee is just paid, and then it's up to the employee to make sure their taxes are paid, for a lot of reasons, but mostly because I think it would make people understand just how much they're being taxed and don't realize it. And there would have to be some adjustments made because a lot of people would not like having to pay the employer portion of things like Social Security that we get to pay. People don't understand. I get to pay, you know, and Bill and everybody else, we pay an extra 7.5%
Exactly.
in taxes because we have to pay both the employee and the employer side of Social Security on ourselves. And when you tell that to people, it breaks their brain. They don't understand that those are things where, you know, and the same thing with healthcare. I would rather not have my healthcare tied to my employer. I would rather be paid the extra whatever a month it is and let me buy my insurance so that if I lose my job, I don't lose my.
See, they stopped that in here. You used to have to pay part of your OHIP. Used to be called OHIP. But then they stopped because no one paid it.
Mm-hmm.
What was the point? No one was paying it.
So, wait, so that was for the health insurance,
Yep.
but they were still covered even though they weren't paying, or they were opting out?
If no way a hospital can say you can't come into this hospital in Canada. They cannot refuse anybody for any reason.
Okay.
If they have a health card. If they don't have a health card, then better have some dollars.
All right. Okay. Yeah, because here people are admitted or refused according to insurance.
Yeah.
coverage. It's very different here.
And if you don't have insurance,
It's horrific.
there aren't many hospitals that'll even take you, probably.
That's right. That's right.
That's sad.
It's so sad.
That's a human right as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if somebody's ending up in the emergency room at a hospital, something is serious, you know, and if the hospital refuses to take them because they don't have insurance, it's heartbreaking. It's inhumane. You know, above all, do no harm goes out the window. So,
And people do get refused.
and people get
People-
refused. That's right.
Yeah, I guess I just
Coming up now with the COVID virus is people going to the hospital and getting tested, and then they end up with a $3,000 or $4,000 bill because they went to the to emergency and they don't have insurance and they don't have a way to pay.
So we are seeing some other changes. One thing I thought was interesting was businesses that are considered essential businesses. It's like the farms where people are picking produce and they're coming across the border to do that. They're considered essential workers, even though they're migrant
Yeah,
workers.
they made the Easter Bunny and Tooth Fairy essential services here this morning.
Really.
I guess a lot of kids were upset that they might not be coming for Easter. The Easter Bunny.
Oh no, that's adorable. And
It's really interesting that because there's so much of it on TV, right? A lot of kids are getting really badly affected by it. A lot of anxiety. They had figures here like 2,000 calls a day from kids to a helpline.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
My granddaughter, who's 8, calls it the bleep, bleep, bleep virus. Doesn't use swear words, but that's what she calls it. This bleep, bleep, bleep virus.
I'm kind of hoping by the end of the month we'll be done here. Kind of looking that way.
Well, here in Oregon, we aren't supposed to peak until, the first week of May or something like that. So it's looking
Yeah,
like,
we've got 8 days till we supposedly peak here in California.
yeah,
Our numbers are already going down.
that's good to hear.
That's good to hear.
Yeah. Well, we were probably a week ahead of the states and shutting shit down.
Mm. Well, California was pretty on top of it.
Because you had that one bad zone.
Yeah.
So we had that one bad.
There was one real hot spot near Los Angeles, I guess, where there's a lot of deaths. Usually it's one home, like an old age home.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a hot spot there. Just outside of Toronto in Bob Cajun. My parents used to have a cottage down there. There's like half of old age home have died.
Yeah,
That's sad, man, when you see that.
It's really sad. And in Washington State, in Seattle, it was the first deaths were seen.
My mom and dad are both in a home, and I call them a couple of times a week now, just asking them what they're doing at the hospital to protect them, or the old age home to protect them. But they're pretty good there. Like last winter, even if as soon as someone gets flu there, they shut the whole place down.
So they're fairly
My
protected.
sister and brother are both in New Jersey, and there's a lot of concern about New Jersey with it as close to New York as it is.
Yes.
Because so many people are traveling who work in New York who live in New Jersey.
That's why New Jersey's hot. Yeah.
So you mentioned New Jersey. I was just reading last night that they're desperately seeking COBOL programmers to volunteer their time to come help them keep their medical mainframes up and running that they have been using for 40 years. These things have been in place for 40 years and they've never upgraded them.
It's the employment records. They're on computers. They're programming COBOL.
But what kills me is they're volunteers. It's like, no.
Yeah,
First of all, who volunteers to go to New Jersey? I mean, that right off the top kind of eliminates a lot of things. And two, if you are any kind of competent at COBOL, you've got a 40-year-old system you're going to be working on that is going to suck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, there is just no way that would be an easy job. And that's going to be stupid expensive because they just let it go.
Yeah.
I remember when the city of Copenhagen got hacked, their computer system, and the mayor of Copenhagen got on the radio and asked for help, wanted free help to get the hackers out of their work.
Yeah, I'm gonna vote no on this, and then I'm gonna look at your budget and show you all the things you can cut to pay me.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a reason why it's 40 years old, because they didn't care to pay to get it updated.
Well, most companies did that in 2000 and the turnover because they were afraid of what would happen.
Yeah, the Y2K.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I seem to recall, I don't remember all the article anymore, but I seem to recall that them basically saying the last time they worked on it was in 2012 for that 2012 issue that was
Oh my
popping up in
God.
places. And they literally have not touched it again in 8 years, knowing full well that this thing was barely holding on then. And now with all of the medical requests going through the system, the whole system is just getting hammered. It's like, you could throw a couple laptops in that room and probably replace that entire mainframe system.
Oh my God.
That's a whole other issue. I see this whole thing getting moved to an Amazon cloud account. Just
There's
Oh my
still a lot
God.
of banks that are using old programming like that.
Oh, yeah.
For their
It's-
internal accounting and shit.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Jerry, you know as well as most of us, IT is never considered anything other than an expense.
Right.
Yes, it's really
That
sad.
people just don't understand that not only is it not an expense, it's usually a mission critical service
Yeah.
that keeps all your other stuff working.
Yep.
Nobody cares about the IT guy until something breaks. They don't care about all the time they spend keeping things running. So, yeah, I have no sympathy for him when that happens.
Mm-hmm. So I was responsible for the courthouse I worked at for doing support during Y2K, which meant updating firmware on the BIOS of laptops and desktops,
Mhm.
lots of stuff like that. So we looked at everything that had a computer in it 3 times and updated most of it.
We had this would have been in the mid 90s, worked with a private investigation company that would get a records export from every county courthouse every day. They had people in every county in California, and they would get the export, and then they would use this information for background checks and whatever. And they brought us in to streamline the process for them. And none of the courthouses use the same system. They all use their own proprietary self-coded program. And we spent 6 months to a year writing a system that basically we gave each person who went to the courthouse a laptop and said, here you go. They're going to hand you a tape, usually. You're going to plug it in. You're going to click this button, and it's going to do everything it needs to do, send it to us, and then our software is going to put it in a brand new Oracle database. And then, the counties are like, well, what would it cost for us to have you link us all together? It's like, no. I know what you want to pay. And there's just absolutely no way we're going to do this for you for, $4 an hour or whatever ridiculous number they thought was appropriate. It was just utter madness.
The courts had public records of cases and organized everything by cases rather than individuals. So if you looked up a person, you had to identify it as the right person. And they had State Bureau of Identification numbers to tell you which William Johnson was which. There were 57 different William Johnsons.
Right.
And a lot of times the counties would use different numbering systems. So you could have William Johnson.
Right.
Oh my God, it was a nightmare.
There were people who came into the court and used a court case system to look up individuals and create history records for those people by compiling all the information about different cases. But we weren't allowed to give them information about specific people. Only the
Only the
state government can do that. The uh, state police had their own computer system, their own headquarters, their own criminal history record check process
yeah.
that you can try to pay for. And it would take them a while to put that together, but they would sell those. And one of the programs I worked on was we worked to compile to get the two systems to communicate with each other, because there were lots of problems with people getting arrested and charged with crime and then indicted on different actions. Like somebody would get arrested for burglary, and the prosecutor would charge them with one charge of burglary and 99 charges of possession of a burglary tool during the commission of felony, because they had like a 99-piece toolkit when they broke in somebody's house. Each of those charges, the 99 charges, had 1 year sentence attached to it. So they'd get the person to plead guilty to the charge of burglary, drop the 99 charges of possession of burglary, possession of a tool during a burglary, as part of the plea. So they'd get a 6-year sentence instead of 106 years. A lot of times people took those pleas. But what that meant was the state police headquarters would have all these charges that we didn't have in our computer system, because we just had something showing that charges were dropped. They weren't necessarily indicted under the same offenses that they were charged under initially by a police officer. So since the two systems didn't work together well, people would get released from prison and have warrants on them, stuff like that, and get rearrested and sit in jail for a while and call up and say, I've done time for these offenses.
Wow.
We're going to file this writ of habeas corpus. So hold on, let me help you. Let me work with you. We can try to figure out what's going on here. And a lot of times, I do the research and send something to the prison records department showing that the person should be released. And it was a terrible thing for me to have to do that. As I was a supervisor of court clerks, but I wasn't their lawyer.
That's crazy.
It was crazy. So we needed to have some way of our computer system, once we had somebody found guilty or pled guilty or found innocent of certain charges, have those charges roll over into the computer, the state police headquarters computer system, which is what the Department of Corrections looked at when they held somebody. It's what the police looked at when they returned people on warrants. So if you had those two systems reconcile each other, you didn't have those problems.
Is it still the same, Bill?
No.
No.
Thankfully, we spent about 4 years or so and fixed that. We integrated the.
I came across something kind of interesting this week. I was looking at. I took Screaming Frog and ran it over one of my sites, and I was looking at the 300, right? The 300 response codes. I had a 307. Then I looked at it on Webmaster Tools, and Google is calling them server errors on the same page. You know what it is? It's when you canonicalize the domain on some servers, they're using 307, which is a 1.1 version of 3.2. So it says move temporarily. And Google's calling them server errors.
Mm.
And you know
So
why
if-
it's caused? It's caused because when we set up the canonical, instead of doing it in the equivalent of hit access, we do it in what's called the host policy, HSTS. And that's what it says in report from Screaming Frog.
Yeah, okay.
So it's not it's basically, when I looked it up, it's a HTTP 1.1 change for 302. So in 1.0 HTTP 10, it's a 302. In 1.1, it's called a 307. It returns 307.
So it's an HTTP config file rather than HT access file.
It would be HT access in, well, I'm not sure what it is on Unix, because I did find it on some Unix servers too, or what I thought were Unix. But I know in Microsoft on IIS, it even in the in where how it describes the type of redirect, right?
Yeah.
Move, found, temporary. It says HSTS policy. So it's not actually doing a redirect. What do you think Google does with that? They're calling them server errors in my on Webmaster Tools, or Search Console, I guess it's called now.
So is
That-
so is a server error? Is it
No, it's not an error. It's not an error. Google
okay.
thinks it is.
Right? All right. Google thinks it is, but is it actually redirecting?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
It does what it's supposed to do. Just the response code is a 307 instead of a 301. And a 307 is a 1.1 equivalent of a 302, which Google does follow and treat just like a 301.
Okay.
But I don't think they've realized that. Well, I'm sure they know the 307 is a new response code, because I'd never seen it before until the other day when I did it. But I'm seeing it on other.
So being me, I have to ask: do you think Google is considering Microsoft servers fringe cases now?
Well, that's where the soft 404s came from. Was originally Microsoft interprets response codes differently than everybody else. They think they're special. They're not, but they think they are. And it's because their servers can't actually do a proper redirect because they don't have a hit access file. It's all done through these wizards, right? And anybody who says use the web config file doesn't have a fucking clue what they're talking about, because web config is flakier than I am. So that's a bad move. But this just started too. It did not do that when we first set it up. It suddenly changed it to a 307 from a 302, which means Microsoft has probably updated the IIS server and changed that internally on it. And Google hasn't picked it up yet. But it is a 1.1 code. I did look it up, and it says it's basically a replacement in 1.1 for the 1.0 3.2 temporarily changed. Move temporarily, that's which, why would anybody put any? I think that's why Google started taking the 302 and treating it as a 301, because in a lot of cases, that's the server doing it, not the person, and they don't have access to the server to change that.
So a 302 is when you send somebody to a page that they need to do something like log in first before they can access it.
It's usually a
it
forward
sends them-
when you're
sends them to
forwarding
a
somebody.
login page.
Like, for
Yeah.
instance, if you detect that somebody's coming from from Canada and you want them to go to the Canadian version of your site, .ca, quite often that gets done with the 302.
Or if you want to translate, if you want to send them to someplace where you get a prompt,
Well, I have,
translate it differently.
to me, I would tell people to split the two sites up because of the pricing. If you the difference in the dollar is 30%. So you want to have different prices on a Canadian site than an American site.
Yeah.
So when a person comes in from the States, you're quoting them a much better price than they would see if they were seeing the Canadian price. And that way they don't have to do the math. But quite often that's done with a 302.
Yeah.
Which again, it's not really, because it's not a temporary move, it's a permanent move. But because it's forwarded, they use the 302. Same as in the old days, if in ASP, if you programmed response.redirect, it was a 302. If you wanted it to be a 301, you had to write different code to get the 301. But I think Google will eventually pick that up myself. If I had John Mueller's email address, I'd email him directly and tell him, hey, this is what it is.
And send them a tweet if you ever get on your Twitter account. He does listen tweets.
So reference him in a tweet. Okay, yeah. Or I was also thinking of going to the Webmaster Hangout on Friday and putting a question in.
It's not that place. He has told me that if I have a question or a problem or something like that, if I send him a tweet, that would be fine.
Okay.
But the Webmaster Hangout would work too. Yeah.
Well, that way a few more people might see it and understand why they're seeing it in their thing. Because I know it surprised me when I saw it. And then I noticed that it was happening on just not my server, but a whole bunch of other servers of people that I knew. And I'm pretty sure that they're on Unix.
Yeah, that'd be worth bringing up. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you ever go to the Webmaster Central help forums? Either?
The what?
The help form.
Webmaster Central help
Yeah,
forums.
I've gone to a few of those. Yeah. When Penguin first came out, I went to a couple.
So I go and read those every once in a while. And John Mueller spent some time there answering people's questions.
Yeah. I think a lot of people watch that too. So if you want to get some information out, that's a good place to mention
Yeah, it
it.
can be.
I'm surprised they haven't figured that out.
There's a lot of moving parts on the web.
Well, when you see a response code that you've never seen before and all of a sudden it's showing up everywhere, I think someone says, well, what the hell's going on out there? And has a look around, see what's going on. I'm pretty sure it's IIS was updated a while ago and just noticed it recently. So
So you can make a life out of fixing Microsoft updates. I told you I did support for a court system. So the judges' secretaries loved using WordPerfect to write in because WordPerfect had macros, and they could write judicial opinions and use macros, so it would write half the things for them. So WordPerfect would update and break all the macros.
Oh my gosh.
And then Word would update, break all the WordPerfect macros, and then 2 days later, WordPerfect would release a new release of WordPerfect that would address all the breaks that that Microsoft updated with Windows, right? So I'd have to fix all these people's computers by installing the WordPerfect update to address the problems with the macros. So yeah, you can make a living out of addressing WordPerfect updates or Word updates.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh, I came across that before. I ended up having to write the 404, the response code, right into the header of the page. Because if it came from the server, it was the soft 404. Ended up at 200.
It wasn't providing the status code?
It was supplying a 200 status code. Again, that was the configuration in IIS. They fixed it about a year later in the next update, like next version of the software. They fixed it, but it was like that for a while.
So I have seen sites that would return a web page that said 404 and return a 200 status code.
That was probably a Microsoft server.
Yeah.
It's quite possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to write into the head of the document, like into the headers of the page for the server after all the server finished rendering the page. Do it after.
So you're sending the status code, the 400 status code by header.
404 by header. Yeah. Had to do that with some 301s on Microsoft too. It was easier than trying to do it through the server. So when a page needed to be 301, you just went to the page and added the 2 lines of code that did it. I did that with, there was a university here in Canada that had, I think they had 4 or 5 sites, different sites, because it was in French and English and they had different versions of the site. I had to figure all the redirection out and then redirect it all from IIS to Unix. That was huge. I had to write a program to write all the pages. All it wrote was the header and what page it pointed to on the new site. So he just mapped it all.
Sounds like a lot of work.
Not really. Took me about an hour to write the program.
Well, figuring out which page should go to which.
Yeah.
That's what took the time, but they did that.
Yeah, okay. If they did that, then
Oh
you
yeah, I
have
would
to. So,
spend that kind of work that's not. I won't do that kind of work too. I say I have a rule: if it'll put me to sleep, not work, I'll do.
I think, unfortunately, a lot of times that's the work people will hire other people to do if we'll put them to sleep.
Yeah, I did my share of that work in the early days. I figure I'd done my part.
Mhm. So, Terry, we're talking about new patents. I told you I'd found one today, just got granted, which talks about Google understanding what's in images in videos to try return videos for queries. And they're trying to understand what's in a video better by freeze framing and seeing what's actually in the video, what things, what objects. They're doing object recognition in those videos to understand better what
Is
the
that
videos are about.
would that be to pick the thumbnail? That's going to be for the.
No, it would be to understand what the video is about.
So they go through the entire video.
What they said was there's a point where we were just looking at the words around video on a page and trying to understand the video based upon those words, the title, the description, things like that.
Okay. All right.
We decided we wanted to be able to look at the video and understand what was actually in the video. Rely less upon the words on the page and more upon what's actually in the video.
So they would see the things that they could identify in a video.
Yeah.
Probably through a neural network.
I don't know. Like I said, I came across this.
Oh, you're
This
still
morning,
looking
just
into it, eh?
I'm still looking into it. I
Yeah,
need to spend some time with it. Yeah.
that'd either be a graph or a neural network, I would think.
I spent about an hour going through it yesterday and formatting it in a way where I could go through it more easily. Get rid of some of the redundant language and then read through it and understand it to write about it.
So all the patents are for Google. YouTube doesn't get patents?
Google usually files patents in Google's name, but they don't necessarily always do that.
They might do it in a subsidiary name. It depends.
2 years ago, I saw Google reassign about 800 patents to Verily, which is one of the medical subsidiaries. I had no idea they had that many medical patents, but they were all medical patents.
Oh.
I know about 10 years ago, I saw one medical patent in Google's name, and that was sort of outstanding because it was one of the very few that were medical in nature.
Right.
So they used to file data center type patents under the name Exaflop. And they did that for a couple of years. And I checked Exaflop patents every once in a while to see if there were any new ones. But they didn't do too many and they stopped doing it after a while.
Mm. So, in the majority of cases, it's still under Google. Except
most of the time.
Is that what I'm hearing?
What's that?
In the majority of cases, the patents are still under Google. Going back to Terry's original question about is it Google or YouTube? And the answer is yes. In the majority of cases, it's under Google.
So
It's
the
patent
other
filed
companies,
Google's name.
the other companies are known as other bets, alternative bets. So
Yeah.
alphabet is a pun. It's an alphabet.
Okay.
So other companies are known as alternative bets, and they weren't necessarily filing patents under the names of some of those companies, but they've changed around the names of some of the companies.
Oh, I
Like
see.
it used to be called Google X, and then they get dropped the Google part and just referred to the company as X.
The AI
And
company they bought, they have patents.
DeepMind, they've been treating differently than other companies they acquired. A lot
Right.
of times with other companies they acquired, they would merge them all into Google. DeepMind, they kept as a company called DeepMind.
Right.
They didn't
And
change
left the patents under their name. That way,
Yeah.
if they sell the company, they can sell the patents too.
I'm not sure they'll ever sell the company, but
Oh, really? Okay.
DeepMind actually has done some productive things in terms of artificial intelligence that are well known, like developing programs that will play Go and will beat world champions at Go, which doesn't mean much to people in SEO, but to people in artificial intelligence, it means a lot.
Yeah.
Because it is a difficult game to play, and most people didn't understand it. It uses reinforcement learning as a type of AI as opposed to neural nets. It doesn't look at patterns as much as it learns new approaches to playing the game, and it might do that by playing itself a million times. So they're not changing the name of any of the DeepMind stuff. But there are a growing number of patents under Google's name that include things like neural nets,
Yeah.
artificial intelligence approaches.
Now that was part of BERT, right?
Not necessarily. BERT is more of a natural language processing pre-training approach. So it's not necessarily neural net based. It's more a way of taking content and understanding things like parts of speech or
Right.
recognizing entities in the text.
Right. I thought that's
No,
what it was using neural networks for, a list of entities.
You can use a dictionary
Oh,
to
okay.
look up. You could recognize in a piece of text if certain words are capitalized, because pronouns tend to be capitalized,
Right.
and say, okay, this is capitalized. Is it an entity? Let's look it up on the dictionary we have,
Right. Okay.
or the thesaurus. And it'll go through a bunch of text and it'll look up all the entities and it'll look up all the verbs that are attached to those entities somehow. And then all the objects, like John Smith would be capitalized, right?
Yeah.
John Smith plays for the Philadelphia Phillies. They would recognize the verb plays. Philadelphia Phillies is another entity they might recognize too. It's again capitalized. So it's a pronoun. So that's what BERT's doing. It's sort of analyzing text
Yep.
and recognizing different parts of speech, different entities, and so on.
My understanding is that it is that BERT is not just analyzing the different parts of speech within a sentence, which is the sentence within a paragraph, et cetera, but that it is finding the relationships within all of the things that it has discovered.
So BERT
within
does a number of different tasks. It doesn't just do the two things I mentioned. It does dozens of them.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. It goes through a whole range of different natural language processing techniques. It tries to find relationships between things. It tries to recognize which words tend to be used near other words.
Yes. Right. Okay. Yeah.
The relationship between those words. So when it comes across text, this is a problem with things like word embeddings, which is a variation, earlier version of what Google was doing with something like BERT. They were trying to analyze words and the relationships to each other.
Right.
So when they came across words like amazing and saw that the word Spider-Man appeared near amazing, it didn't mean that all Spider-Men are amazing. It's something that occurred frequently.
Yeah, I think to go back to Terry's question at the beginning is that it learns as it goes, as it reads more and more text and sees the relationships of those words, entities, phrases, and all the different parts of speech. So that it's actually analyzing the syntax of each sentence within the text and then putting the relationship of the various entities within the entire text in relationship. It learns as it goes, so if it finds another body of text and it also sees the relationship of the entities in that body of text. So it is expanding as it goes. That's my understanding.
Okay, but what was the question again?
It wasn't a question. It was like I'm trying to understand if I understand what it does. Terry had the question of whether it was learning, if it was learning, and my understanding is the short answer is yes, it is, because as it analyzes more text, it learns more about the relationship.
But I was talking about Google trying to learn from videos.
Yeah, right. Videos. I'm still.
It was doing object recognition. But it doesn't have text to analyze from the videos while it's doing the object recognition. So it can do image analysis to try to understand what's in the images, what entities are pictured. So it can recognize that if you've got a video of a bear fishing, hunting fish in a stream, it knows that bears hunt in streams. They fish. The object that's wriggling around the bear's mouth is a fish. It can recognize those different entities, and it's not quite the same as what BERT does.
Right.
But it's simpler type analysis. It's not what a neural network does either. Now, a neural network might look at 500,000 videos on YouTube and be able to tell you at some point, this video that is here in front of us is about a cat. I recognize this because I've seen lots of videos of cats. And Google won a ImageNet award when it had a program that started recognizing cats. They didn't train it beforehand what a cat was. The cat looks like this and this and this. It just saw so many videos, it started recognizing cats. It knew what they were. And that was using a neural network. It's not the approach they're talking about in this patent, though.
So bear, fish, stream, I can understand. What if you go to something like, who's that guy? I think he calls himself the French guy, and he has this amazing kitchen set up in a garage somewhere with all these tools and things that he uses when he's cooking. And so is this going to look at every object that is in that video? That's what I'm wondering. Or only the objects that he's using at that particular moment?
Have you tried to use Google Lens, the app? You can take a picture of an area and you can narrow the focus of the picture you took down to a specific object in the picture and ask Google Lens to tell you what the object is. And Google's been trying to identify what objects are in images, and they can do that fairly well. So they might take a video of a guy doing cooking and try to recognize all different objects in his videos.
So is this patent then? I don't know how to say this. Is it like expanding a catalog of objects? Is that the purpose of this new patent? To look at the videos?
The invention relates generally to identifying videos or their parts that are relevant to search terms.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. Okay.
So they're trying to make it so that if you do a search for something and there is a video that's about what you're searching for, that video may show up as a response to your query.
Okay.
So if you search for that French guy who cooks lots of stuff, they might show
there
you
would be lots of those.
Yeah.
I said there'd be lots of those. Frenchmen who cook.
But I think that the thing is that in his particular setup, workshop, whatever you want to call it, he has traditional standard objects from a kitchen, but he also has things that he has made himself.
So you have a way of describing those? What would you search for to find him?
I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think. He made a thing to, it's like a roller press to press dough together to make it thinner and thinner and thinner, and then repress it together again for making croissants. So that's
shoe pastry.
Or, he made this thing. It's, you look at it, it's like plywood thing with rollers and stuff. It isn't fancy. It doesn't look all chromy, professional kitchen, but it does the job. I was just curious. Okay, so objects, So what is it seeing?
That sounds like a pasta maker. No.
Yeah, it's actually it's a dough roller press for rolling the very thin layers that go
Yep.
to
It's called shoe
combine
pastry.
making a true croissant as opposed to
CHUX
stuff we get here.
pastry. I
Yeah,
learned how to make it. It's got 128 layers in it.
yeah, it's just incredible. You just
And about a pound of butter. So,
yeah, it's butter and labor intensive.
yeah, very labor intensive.
So chew pastry roller.
Yeah, it's a pastry roller. You put the butter and the dough in, and you roll it through so there's a compression, right? It rolls along.
CHOO.
I'm sorry, Bill?
No, it's CHOUX. Shoe.
Shoot.
It's French.
Wait a second. Anyway, he made one, So I was just curious. So, is Google going to recognize this, or is the patent going to go? Don't know what this is. Come back later for this one. See what I'm saying? If the goal of the patent is to recognize objects, how far does it go? Or does it stop and look at this thing and go, because he does explain it as he's building this thing. He explains what he's building. Does the patent go that deep, or does it just say, say, I know this thing, I don't know this thing?
It would work just like any other query.
Okay.
So his name Jock Pepin, yeah.
Oh yeah, it's not Pepin. Chuck Pepin is a French chef.
Jacques.
Anyway, it doesn't. It doesn't. I think he calls himself the French guy. Did you look up the French guy?
What's that?
There's a few million of those.
Yeah, I know. But what do you want?
So if I search chew pastry roller, I do get a couple of videos back.
Yeah.
We'll see. It's the idea that the idea that they might index videos by the objects in the videos as opposed to the words around the video.
Right.
I think opens up some opportunities.
Yeah.
It does, and it opens up the opportunities for videos which are inadvertent, intentionally misdescribed with information.
When you
know exactly what is really in the video.
When you think of all the captchas they have with pictures now that are identifying certain objects in a picture, I think they could link those two things up and probably pick stuff out of a video based on it.
Okay.
I told you about Google Photos reintroducing the image labeler game. And if you want, you can go to Google Photos and play the image labeler game and identify things in photographs.
In photos.
And I can see Google, and that was invented by the same guy who invented the capture program that Google uses.
So he combined the two things together to make a captcha.
Well, it's like captchas used to show street numbers, and there were signs from businesses.
And stuff from books, right? Originally, it was stuff from books when they were doing the
books, when they were doing the book scanning project.
Right.
And then they were using the numbers from businesses to help with Google My Business.
Right. And they were also taking pictures of the numbers on a business for that reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get a few hundred people saying that the numbers are the same numbers each time they see them. You can get a good sense that they're telling the truth.
Yeah.
So the image labeler, they can use that with the images from videos too. Yeah. You crowdsource, you get lots and lots and lots of people identifying what's in videos.
Right. And they could start by pulling images out of the videos, saying what they think they are, and then asking people to verify that's what this is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're doing stuff with captures with images too.
Most of the ones I see now are images. Always seems to be stoplights and trucks.
Yeah. Identify all the images with cars.
Doesn't it?
And signs. Signs as well are really big. They seem to all be transport related.
They are transport related.
No,
So
seriously. When I look at them.
So maybe they're getting those from Street Views.
Trying to, yeah, could be.
We want to see if these intersections actually have stoplights at them. So,
Right.
intersections and have you tell them which ones have stoplights.
Because that's probably something they're trying to pick up for their other directions and stuff like that, or traffic on a street as well, eh?
Yeah.
And time estimates for arrival. Make a difference how many stops you have.
Oh, for sure.
Guys,
Especially if they're like here, then none of them are lined up.
I've got to go. It's really great to be back.
That's 419.
Yes, yeah, aren't we? Thank you all for joining us.
Okay.
Take care now.
Bye.